I'm Ezrah Raya, and this is the Manila Times. Economic Cha-Cha or charter change is expected to be approved at the lower house session later today. Resolution of both houses, or RBH number 7, proposes to amend restrictions on three economic provisions of the 1987 Constitution on education, public utilities, and advertising sectors. Meanwhile, the Senate's RBH number 6 is still at a subcommittee level. World Economic Forum President Jorge Brende backs the reforms on foreign ownership limits in the Philippine Constitution. The authors of the bill, RBH 7, House leaders, recently called for the nation's economic policies to be reframed under the demands of the increasingly globalized age. However, several lawmakers and groups opposes amending the Constitution. Here to share his insights is economic think tank, IBON Foundation's Executive Director, Jose Enrique, Sonny Africa. Welcome to the Manila Times, Sir Sonny. Yes, Sir Sonny, you have voiced strong opposition against amending the Constitution. So some lawmakers would say it's regressive and ultra-conservative to oppose these economic provisions. So what are the possible downfalls and why are you against RBH number 7 and RBH number 6?
Well, fundamentally, we don't really believe there are any strong arguments for economic cha-cha, as the proponents claim. We did attend the Senate hearings and the House of Representatives hearings, and I think anyone who looks at the facts will be unconvinced. There's been a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of logical fallacies and wrong argumentation. But unfortunately, I think the House had decided on RBH 7 as soon as it was filed. I think it's irrelevant to them that none of the economic cha-cha arguments hold water. They went through the motions of debating the measure. I think it's a Trojan horse for perhaps some other political interests.
Yes, sir. So the RBH 7, no, as it says, it seeks to amend restrictions, economic restrictions on education, public utilities, and the advertising sector. So do you think this would help the Philippines more?
There's a fundamental problem with the thinking. Their premise is that the Philippine economy is close to foreign investment, and they fixate on the 87 Constitution as supposedly restricted to foreign investment. But the fundamental error there is that it's not just the Constitution that defines openness, but also all the laws prevailing in the country. And taken all together, categorically, the Philippines is already among the most open economies to foreign investment in the region. Looking not just at the Constitution, but looking at all the various laws that have been passed since the 87 Constitution was promulgated in 1987. So we have the laws allowing entry of foreign banks, laws on retail trade liberalization, laws amended the Foreign Investment Act. Of course, most recently, the law amended the Public Services Act. If you take it all together, categorically, the Philippines is much more open to foreign investment in many key sectors than Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, actually even China. So I think if the premise is that we need to open up because we're closed, the fact is, looking beyond the Constitution, which is a very narrow way of thinking, we actually are very open. And I think we also want to stress the fact that a lot of arguments are about we're supposed to be more flexible, more open. The bottom line is, do we need the foreign investment restrictions or not? I think we do. The fact that countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia have stronger restrictions on foreign investment in the utilities, in telecommunications, in the power sector, in transport. The fact that countries like Vietnam actually completely close off not just to foreign investment, but to private investment, for instance, in the distribution transmission of electricity with a monopoly of by a state-owned enterprise, it just, I think, affirms the question is not about flexibility. The question is, do we need the restrictions or not? If other countries to this day feel they need restrictions, even if it's not in their constitution, they have laws enforcing the restrictions. So that it points to the problem. It's not lack of openness that's our problem. The problem is we're not developing domestic capacity in these sectors like other countries in the region are doing. So we completely disagree with the idea that the Philippines is closed. The Philippines is categorically not closed. There's often reference to an OECD study. It's outdated. The OECD study was made until in 2020. It's actually going to be discontinued. I think this month, the OECD will even discontinue that study. So any reference to a so-called OECD FDI restrictiveness index is irrelevant. And actually, it's deceitful because that does not reflect the current openness of the Philippine economy.
So from what you're saying, there's no need to amend the constitution as you're for developing the domestic capacity of the country. So President Bongbong
Oh,
Marcos have
actually, I think it's an important point. We have to stress it's not the lack of foreign investment that is a problem in terms of our economic development. If anything, it's that fixation on foreign investment that's a problem. Because if other countries feel the need to regulate foreign investment to develop their domestic utilities, their domestic manufacturing, that points to where we should be going. So there's a misinterpretation of what countries like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia are doing. The misinterpretation is that it's their openness of foreign investment that is supposedly made them develop. That's untrue. It's a fact that they regulate foreign investment to contribute local technologies, to develop local technologies, to develop the domestic market, to develop their domestic capacities. That is the reason for their much more advanced development. And if they don't get rid of this fetish for foreign investment, as if just because it's here, it will develop us. If you don't get rid of that fetish, we are going to be pursuing economic policy in the wrong direction. And I think we really do want to stress a good case in point is manufacturing. Manufacturing is 100% open to foreign investment, apart from some very marginal nominal restrictions in sa paputok, nuclear, chemical, biological weapons, things like that. Filipino manufacturing is 100% open to foreign investment, but despite that 100% foreign openness, Philippine manufacturing in 2023 has fallen to a smaller share of the economy than in 1949. Philippine manufacturing as a share of the economy is its smallest in 75 years, despite being 100% open to foreign investment. I think that points to how it's not foreign investment per se that's important, it's an attitude to develop domestic industry. And the 1987 Constitution is very strong in asserting industrialization.
Sir President Bongbong Marcos have done a lot of traveling, as we all know. So just
Mm.
recently he's at the World Economic Forum, so precisely to promote foreign direct investments. So I think his goal is to increase money that's coming in the economy. So the amendments would actually back these FDIs. Isn't that correct?
Actually, that's a bit weird because they were very selective in choosing the economic measures to open up. The Constitution only actually has about 9 provisions on foreign investment restrictions. They chose three, I think, now the most uncontroversial because they wanted to get a charter change process going. It's not really fundamentally about economic charter change. To be clear, the remaining utilities that are not yet open, um, education institutions, and advertising, altogether, by our estimate, that's only about 6% of the domestic economy. It's a very, very small portion of the economy that will still be opened up. But these three measures, one, even if they are created, they will not be the decisive factor in attracting foreign investment because foreign investment has other considerations. I mean, any foreign businessman will always say, as a matter of principle, they prefer openness to none. But in practice, in the real world, there are much bigger considerations preventing their profitable location in the Philippines, for infrastructure, corruption, including meddling lawmakers in terms of franchises, in terms of all the other um, regulatory considerations, for infrastructure, and a whole host of other things. So constitutional restrictions on foreign investment, in reality, if business mode, foreign business will be honest, they're not fundamental in their consideration. And again, we refer to the experience of other countries in the region with much higher levels of foreign investment. They're much more closed, not in the constitution, but by ordinary law. But it doesn't matter. The point is they are closed, but they attract more investment because they tackle the other factors to make them themselves attractive investment destinations. Not that we agree that it's all about being attractive. We think there are more fundamental policy measures for developing Philippine industry that need to be taken. But even that argument, that's a dead end argument for us.
Sir Sonny, I'm going back to what you said
Mm.
earlier. So you called the economic amendments to the 1987 Constitution a Trojan horse. How so?
Um, we think it's a Trojan horse because if you look at the behavior of at least the House of Representatives, they're not actually paying attention to the fundamentals, the facts of the matter regarding economic Chacha. They seem to have decided early on that they will pass RBH 7. That's also on the back of a previous people's initiative, driven apparently by many representatives. So we think it's a Trojan horse because the real agenda seems to be to open up the Philippine Constitution to provisions. I think this is a stratagem to try to get some clarity on how exactly current politicians in power can manipulate the Constitution to their self-interest, like extending their stay in power. But it's a legal stratagem, I think, that should be tested, of course, with maybe a Supreme Court decision, maybe through a plebiscite. But in the end, if they're using economic arguments to push for economic chacha, none of these economic arguments really hold water. I think the facts are very clear in that regard.
So you're more suspicious about amending the constitution in a way that it's designed to keep the current people in power, in their positions.
Um,
Is that correct?
Very much so, because constitutions are always a product of their times. Constitutions are always a product of the political system prevailing. If you recall, the 87 Constitution came after the ouster of the Marcos dictatorship. That's why there's very strong provisions on controlling the stay of politicians in power. Has very strong provisions on human rights. Actually, it also has very strong provisions on developing the Philippine economy, industrializing it, actually learning from the experience of countries in the 1970s and 1980s that were protecting their own domestic economies, like South Korea, like Taiwan, to some degree even China. So I think the wisdom of the 87 Constitution was because it was a product of its time, with a very strong anti-dictatorship struggle, with a very strong sense of economic nationalism. Unfortunately, right now, those conditions are not prevailing. We have a political system where disinformation and populism are still rampant. We have a political system where voters are seen very cynically as mere voters, not as constituents in a public polity. I think those aren't the real conditions where we can expect a good constitution reflecting the real aspirations of the people can come out.
So, sir, what you're saying is there's no need for an economic amendment to the constitution. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, categorically, if Congress, in its heart of hearts, really wanted to develop the Philippine economy, if they really wanted to improve the plight of ordinary Filipinos, where 7 out of 10 Filipinos are poor or borderline poor or don't even have any savings, we don't need constitutional change for that. There are huge powers by the executive right now to expand social services, to expand emergency cash assistance, to even develop Philippine industry. If anything, the Philippine Constitution gives the legal basis for developing Filipino industry by asserting Filipino control over the local economy, by enabling regulation, strong regulation of foreign investors to come here, so that when they come here, they're not just here taking advantage of our cheap productive labor or natural resources or a bit of a tiny domestic market. They're here actually contributing to developing Philippine industrial capacity. In other countries, let's see, it's something we do want to stress. Other countries use foreign investment restrictions to be able to get some leverage over foreign investors locating there to develop local technology, to increase local employment, to make sure that there is some improvement in domestic industrial capacity, not just being mere addresses for foreign manufacturers basing in their countries.
So, sir, to be clear, Ibon Foundation is advocating for developing domestic capacity against foreign investment. Is that
Um, our, our, our main point is we have the Philippine government has to adopt a posture of developing Philippine industrial capacity, and any foreign investment that is allowed in should be regulated to contribute to developing that Philippine industrial capacity. And a whole host of measures include technology transfer, local input, local manpower requirements. I think these things will not happen without the leverage that the constitutional restrictions actually give us right now.
okay? Thank you, sir. Sir Sonny, Ibon Foundation's executive director. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ezra. Anytime.